On October 27, 2021, a 13-year-old boy from Utah fell to his death from Angel's Landing in Zion National Park. He was hiking with his family on one of the most famous trails in the American National Park system. The chains were there. The warning signs were there. The trail was exactly as it had always been. He fell anyway. His name has not been released publicly out of respect for his family. He is one of at least 19 people who have died on or near Angel's Landing in recorded park history. He was 13 years old. This trail is hiked by hundreds of thousands of people every year. But what most people who attempt it never fully understand is the nature of what they are actually climbing and what the consequences of a single misstep on that rock actually are. This national park is loved by millions of visitors every year. But what most people don't know is the dark truth hidden beneath its beauty. Stay until the end to discover the shocking reality. Zion National Park sits in the southwestern corner of Utah, carved by the Virgin River over millions of years into a canyon system of Navajo sandstone that rises in some places nearly 3,000 feet above the canyon floor. The park covers 147,551 acres. Its main corridor, Zion Canyon, is approximately 15 miles long and up to half a mile wide, a passage of vertical walls in shades of red, orange, and white that has been drawing visitors since the early 20th century. In 2023, Zion received approximately 4.7 million visitors, making it the second most visited national park in the United States. The vast majority of those visitors came for one reason above all others: Angel's Landing. Angel's Landing is a 1,488-foot sandstone monolith rising from the floor of Zion Canyon. The trail to its summit is 5.4 miles round trip, gaining 1,488 feet of elevation. The final half mile, the section that defines the experience and defines the danger, follows a narrow sandstone ridge with drop-offs of hundreds of feet on both sides, assisted by chains bolted into the rock that hikers use to pull themselves up and lower themselves down. It is one of the most photographed hikes in the United States. It appears on every list of America's best trails. It has been described in guidebooks, travel magazines, and social media posts millions of times as a must-do experience in the American Southwest. It has also killed at least 19 people in documented incidents, making it the trail with the highest number of hiking fatalities in the state of Utah. To understand why Angel's Landing kills people, you first need to understand what the rock actually is. The Navajo sandstone that forms Angel's Landing and the walls of Zion Canyon was deposited approximately 190 million years ago as ancient sand dunes, an enormous desert that covered much of what is now the American Southwest. Over millions of years, those dunes were buried, compressed, and cemented into stone. The result is a rock that is, in geological terms, relatively young and relatively soft compared to the granite of Yosemite or the ancient metamorphic rock of the Appalachians. Navajo sandstone weathers in a specific way. The surface of the rock, the part that hikers touch, stand on, and grip, is subject to spalling. Thin layers of the surface separate and flake away over time. This process is accelerated by freeze-thaw cycles, by the expansion and contraction of the rock through daily temperature changes, and by the mechanical stress of hundreds of thousands of footsteps over decades. What this means in practice is that the surface of the Angel's Landing Trail is not static. The rock that hikers stand on is slowly, continuously changing. A handhold that was reliable 5 years ago may be less reliable today. A foothold that appears solid may have a surface layer ready to separate. The rock looks the same. It is not always the same. The National Park Service conducts regular assessments of the trail's condition. They cannot assess every square foot of every surface that hikers touch. The trail is too long, the surface area too large, and the process of weathering too continuous for any inspection regime to fully capture. This is not a criticism of the Park Service. It is a description of the geological reality of a trail that runs across 190-million-year-old sandstone that is, at a molecular level, in a state of continuous, slow dissolution. The chain section of Angel's Landing is approximately half a mile long. It begins at Scout Lookout, a broad, flat area at the base of the final ridge where hikers can see the full road ahead and make a genuine decision about whether to continue. The National Park Service has placed signs at Scout Lookout explicitly stating that the route beyond is dangerous, that people have died, and that turning back is a legitimate choice. A significant number of hikers read those signs and continue anyway. To understand why, you need to understand a specific psychological phenomenon that researchers call commitment bias, the tendency to continue a course of action because of the investment already made rather than because of a rational assessment of what lies ahead. A hiker who has driven to Zion, secured a permit, woken up early, walked 2 miles to the trailhead, and ascended the 21 steep switchbacks of Walter's Wiggles to reach Scout Lookout has made a substantial investment in reaching the summit. The signs at Scout Lookout ask them to consider abandoning that investment. Most do not. This is not irrationality. It is a deeply human response to what economists call sunk cost, the psychological difficulty of walking away from something you have already paid for, in time, effort, and expectation. But on Angel's Landing, it is a response that the terrain does not accommodate. The chain section does not care about the investment a hiker has made to reach it. It presents the same exposure, the same drop-offs, the same weathered sandstone to every person, regardless of how far they have come or how much they want to reach the top. The mountain does not grade on desire. The drop-offs on the Angel's Landing chain section are not uniform. They vary along the route, and the variation matters for understanding how people die there. In some sections, the trail is several feet wide, narrow by normal hiking standards, but wide enough that a careful hiker with good balance is not in immediate danger of falling. In other sections, the trail narrows to less than 2 feet. In these sections, there is a drop of several hundred feet on one side and a drop of several hundred feet on the other. At these points, a stumble, not a dramatic fall, not a medical emergency, not a catastrophic error in judgment, just a stumble, can send a person over the edge before they have time to react. The chains are the safety system. They are bolted into the rock at intervals, and hikers use them to maintain contact with the wall on the uphill side of the ridge. But the chains are a shared resource on a two-way trail. Hikers ascending and hikers descending use the same chains, moving in opposite directions, passing each other on sections of trail that are sometimes barely wide enough for one person. When two hikers meet on a narrow section of the chain route, one going up, one going down, one of them must release the chain to allow the other to pass. In that moment, on terrain with a drop of 500 feet on one side, they are standing on weathered sandstone without a handhold while another person moves past them. This happens hundreds of times on a busy day. Most of the time, nothing goes wrong. The times when something goes wrong are in the incident record. The documented deaths on Angel's Landing span nearly 4 decades of recorded incidents. Each case is distinct. Each leaves a gap in the official record that is worth examining. In May 1987, a woman from Denver, Colorado lost her balance near the upper section of Angel's Landing and fell approximately 250 feet. She was the first death recorded in the park's modern incident record for this trail. In April 1989, Jeffrey Robert Dwyer, 28, of California, an experienced climber, died after falling approximately 150 feet from a rock formation near the summit. The investigation noted an unusual amount of blood found above the fall point, and investigators considered whether the death was accidental, a suicide, or something else. It was ultimately recorded as accidental. In January 2003, Dorothy Kaiser, 66, was hiking alone on Angel's Landing on a clear winter morning. Near Scout Lookout, a patch of frost-glazed sandstone ended her hike. Her body was found in Refrigerator Canyon, the narrow gorge that runs below the chain section. Some who investigated the case noted that Kaiser had a terminal illness, which raised questions that were ultimately not resolved in the public record. In June 2004, Christopher Jones, 14, a Boy Scout from Long Beach, California, was hiking with his troop when, according to the account that emerged afterward, he went out onto a narrow ledge on a $5 dare. He never came back. His mother later publicly questioned why no adult in the group had stopped him. Two boys, one 13, one 14, different decades, the same trail, the same sandstone, the same drop. In August 2006, Bernadette Vandermeer, 29, traveled from the Netherlands with her husband to see Zion. They had reached the upper ridge when winds began to rise. She fell. Her husband survived. In August 2009, Nancy Maltez, 55, of Virginia, lost her hold on the chain and fell more than 1,000 feet from the ridge's north side. It happened on a crowded summer weekend when the trail was at maximum capacity. Hikers passing in both directions, chains shared, the narrow sections more congested than they were designed to handle. In November 2009, Tammy Grunig, 50, a skilled Utah hiker, fell nearly 1,000 feet while descending. In her memory, her family later donated to Zion's Rescue Fund. In April 2010, Regine Melibedzki, 63, was visiting from Germany when light rain and wind moved through the canyon. Near Scout Lookout, the sandstone turned slick beneath her. She fell nearly 1,000 feet into Refrigerator Canyon. What you notice when you read these cases is not a pattern of recklessness. Melibedzki was caught by weather that arrived while she was already on the trail. Maltez lost her grip on a chain that was wet or crowded. Vandermeer was on the upper ridge when the wind changed. Grunig was descending. The part of the hike that experienced mountaineers consistently identify as more dangerous than the ascent, because fatigue is higher, attention has dropped, and the visual confirmation of a safe foothold below you is harder to get than above you. These were people who did most things right. The margin between what they did and what was required was measured in fractions. In April 2019, Pradeep Beryl Solomon, 35, a software engineer visiting from India, fell from the north side of Angel's Landing while descending. Witnesses reported strong winds and congested trail conditions at the time. He had reached the summit. He was on his way back down. In November 2019, Savannah McTague, 19, a college student from Maine, fell from near the summit during high winds. Her case received significant national media coverage and led to new caution signage being installed at the trailhead. In March 2021, Jason Hartwell, 43, of Draper, Utah, fell from the summit ridge after stopping to take photographs. His death was the last confirmed fatality before the National Park Service's permit system launched in 2022. In October 2021, a 13-year-old boy from Utah fell while hiking with his family. His name has not been released. He is the youngest person in the documented death record of Angel's Landing, 3 deaths in less than a year, 2019 to 2021, on a trail the Park Service had been discussing restricting for years. The permit system was implemented in 2022. In April 2026, a man from Texas fell to his death from the chained portion of the north side, the first fatal fall since the permit system went into effect. The permits reduced crowding. They did not change the sandstone. The permit system that Zion implemented for Angel's Landing in 2022 was the first trail-specific permit system in the park's history. It required hikers to enter a lottery for access to the chain section, capping the number of people on the ridge at any given time, and eliminating the dangerous congestion that had built up through the 2000s as social media made the trail globally famous. The debate that preceded the permit system reflected a genuine tension at the heart of managing a dangerous trail on public land. Restricting access to a natural feature in a national park raises questions about equity, about who gets to experience one of America's most spectacular places and who does not. The permit system was a compromise, limiting numbers without eliminating access, reducing crowding without closing the trail. But the debate also revealed something the data had already established. The deaths on Angel's Landing are not primarily a function of crowding. Some occurred when the trail was packed. Some occurred when the hiker was nearly alone on the chain section. The 2006 death of Bernadette Vandermeer happened on a trail that was not at its peak summer capacity. The January 2003 death of Dorothy Kaiser happened in winter, when few hikers were on the mountain at all. The permit system addresses what happens when too many people compete for the same narrow space. It does not address the sandstone, the drop-offs, the weather, or the mathematical relationship between a single lost step and a 100-foot fall. Now consider what the weather does to this equation. Zion Canyon sits in a region of Utah that receives afternoon thunderstorms with regularity from July through September. The North American monsoon, a seasonal weather pattern that draws moisture from the Gulf of California and the Gulf of Mexico into the desert southwest. These storms build rapidly. A morning that starts clear can put a hiker on the chain section under a full thunderstorm by early afternoon, with lightning arriving faster than descent is possible. The summit of Angel's Landing is a bare sandstone monolith, rising above the surrounding canyon walls. It is one of the most exposed lightning targets in Zion Canyon. A hiker on the chain section when a thunderstorm arrives has no shelter, no route off the mountain that takes less than 30 minutes, and is standing on a wet metal chain bolted to wet sandstone during a lightning event. Rain transforms the chain section in a specific and well-documented way. Navajo sandstone provides reasonable friction when dry. When wet, it becomes one of the most treacherous walking surfaces in the national park system. The same rock that felt secure underfoot becomes unreliable within minutes of rainfall. The chains themselves, steel cable under tension, become slick. The wooden footboards placed at intervals along the chain section can hold water and become as slippery as polished glass. The April 2010 death of Regine Milobetsky occurred when light rain moved through the canyon. Light rain, not a thunderstorm, not a downpour. A light rain, on a clear spring day that had looked favorable enough to attempt the hike, was sufficient to make the sandstone near Scout Lookout lethal. The National Park Service recommends against hiking Angel's Landing when rain is forecast or when the rock is wet. The recommendation is posted at the trailhead and at Scout Lookout. Hikers who are already on the chain section when rain arrives cannot act on the recommendation. They are already there. On September 14, 2015, a group of 7 people entered Keyhole Canyon in Zion National Park at approximately 3:30 in the afternoon. Their names were Gary Favela, 51, of Rancho Cucamonga, California; Don Teichner, 55, of Mesquite, Nevada; Muku Reynolds, 59, of Chino, California; Steve Arthur, 58, of Camarillo, California, a sergeant and 21-year veteran of the Ventura County Sheriff's Department; Linda Arthur, 57, also of Camarillo, Steve's wife; Robin Brum, 53, of Camarillo; and Mark McKenzie, 56, of Valencia, California. Before entering the canyon, they had taken a photograph together, a self-portrait of the group at the first rappel, all 7 of them looking out at the camera. It is the last known photograph of all of them alive. Earlier that morning, when they picked up their canyoneering permit at 7:40 a.m., park rangers had told them explicitly, "Flash flooding today is probable." The warning was not vague. It was not buried in small print. It was delivered face-to-face, using the word probable. Some in the group were new to canyoneering. They had taken a course that morning. Keyhole Canyon, a short, narrow slot canyon on the eastern side of the park, is classified as an entry-level canyoneering route. It requires several rappels under 30 feet and swimming through pools of water. It is the kind of route that beginners attempt on their first canyoneering day. At 2:22 p.m., a flash flood warning was issued by the National Weather Service. The park closed all canyons and posted the warning at every contact station. The group entered Keyhole Canyon between 3:30 and 4:30 p.m. after the warning had been issued, but before rangers could physically prevent their entry. Zion National Park, under federal law, cannot bar a permit holder from accessing a canyon based on weather conditions alone. Between 4:30 and 5:30 p.m., Zion Canyon received 0.63 inches of rain in under 1 hour. The flow of the North Fork of the Virgin River rose from 55 cubic feet per second to 2,630 cubic feet per second in 15 minutes. In Keyhole Canyon, there is almost no high ground. The slot runs between walls that rise straight up, with no ledges, no exits, and no route upward. The canyon fills from the bottom. There is nowhere to go. Park rangers could not safely enter Keyhole Canyon until the following day. The search and recovery operation involved more than 60 searchers from multiple agencies over 1,135 hours. The last body, Linda Arthur, was found on Thursday morning, September 18th, in Pine Creek Canyon, miles downstream from where the flood had found her. 7 people entered a canyon on a Monday afternoon. 7 people did not come out. Their bodies were carried miles through the park's drainage system by water that rose 50 times its normal volume in 15 minutes. The group had taken a photograph together at the first rappel. They were smiling. That single event, September 14th, 2015, accounts for the deadliest day in Zion National Park's modern recorded history. 7 deaths in one afternoon. And it did not happen on Angel's Landing. It did not happen on any of the park's famous hiking trails. It happened in a slot canyon that the park's own materials classified as a beginner route. Between 2007 and 2025, 57 people died in Zion National Park, according to National Park Service mortality data. Falls are by far the leading cause. 28 of those 57 deaths involved falling from the park's rock features. Flash floods account for 8 deaths. Medical emergencies for 6. Hypothermia for 4. The 7 deaths in Keyhole Canyon represent nearly the entire flash flood total in the park's modern data. They represent what happens when a beginner canyoneering group, warned explicitly of flood risk, enters a slot canyon with no high ground on an afternoon when the weather does exactly what the warning said it would do. The park cannot legally stop a permit holder from going in. The park cannot physically reach a person inside a slot canyon once a flood has started. The canyon does not grade on experience level or risk tolerance. It fills with water the same way regardless of who is inside it. Return to Angel's Landing, because it has one more secret that its extensive coverage almost never mentions. The summit of Angel's Landing is not a safe platform at the top of a difficult climb. The chains end before the summit. The final approach involves moving over open, unassisted sandstone to reach the actual high point of the ridge. Hikers who have successfully navigated the chain section, who have done what most people consider the hard part, who feel the psychological relief of having passed through the most visually intimidating terrain, arrive at ground that is still exposed, still sloped in multiple directions, and still capable of a fatal fall. The psychological shift that occurs when the chains end, the sense of having passed the danger, is not supported by the actual topography of the summit. The danger does not end with the chains. It simply changes character, and it changes precisely at the moment when the hiker's alertness is most likely to have dropped. On September 13th, 2018, a hiker fell from the Angel's Landing area and died. The circumstances, as reported by the National Park Service, indicated the fall occurred not on the chain section itself, but in the terrain near the summit. Beyond the chains, where the route is less defined, and the hiker is most likely to feel that the serious part is behind them. It was not behind them. There is a specific feature of the modern Angel's Landing experience that social media has fundamentally altered, and the alteration shows up in the incident record in ways that are not always acknowledged directly. The trail became globally famous through photographs, images of hikers standing on the narrow ridge with the canyon dropping away on both sides, images that communicate both the exposure and the achievement simultaneously. Those images, shared millions of times across Instagram and other platforms, created a specific expectation in the minds of people who had never been to Zion, that Angel's Landing was a place where you stood on the edge, looked out over the canyon, and had your photograph taken. The photograph requires standing near the edge. Standing near the edge on Angel's Landing is not the same as standing near the edge of a viewpoint with a guardrail. There is no guardrail. There is sandstone, and then there is air, and then there is the canyon floor, 1,488 feet below. The National Park Service has documented incidents in which hikers moved off the established trail to reach a better position for a photograph, onto terrain that had not been assessed for stability. Terrain that offered the view but not the footing. In some of these incidents, the hiker fell. Jason Hartwell, 43, fell from the summit ridge in March 2021 after stopping to take photographs. The trail he had been on was right there. The photographs he wanted required him to be slightly off it. The sandstone did not distinguish between the two locations. The drop below them was identical. The image that made Angel's Landing globally famous is also, in a specific and documented way, part of what makes it dangerous. The photograph creates a destination. The destination creates a behavior. The behavior creates a risk that the photograph never shows, that the Instagram post never mentions, and that the hiker in the image is already past and safe from, but that the next person who sees the image and comes to replicate it may not be. In June 2004, Christopher Jones was 14 years old and on a Boy Scout trip. He died on a $5 dare. His mother, in the years after his death, spoke publicly about the incident, about why no adult had stopped him, about what the trail asks of the people responsible for children who are on it, about the specific vulnerability of young people in a place that simultaneously demands judgment and overwhelms it with spectacle. The 13-year-old who died in October 2021 was hiking with his family. The 14-year-old who died in June 2004 was hiking with his scout troop. Both deaths are in the documented record of Angel's Landing. Both involve children under 15 on a trail that requires, at its most dangerous sections, the kind of physical stability, spatial awareness, and fear response that adolescent neuroscience suggests is not yet fully developed. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that fully integrates risk assessment, impulse control, and long-range consequence evaluation, does not reach full maturation until approximately age 25. This is not a judgment about the intelligence or character of young people who attempt Angel's Landing. It is a description of a developmental reality that the trail does not accommodate in its design or in its current permit system, which does not set a minimum age for access to the chain section. The National Park Service has not established a minimum age for the Angel's Landing permit. As of 2025, any permitted hiker of any age can access the chain section. This remains a subject of ongoing discussion in the park management community and among the families of children who have died there. Now step back from Angel's Landing entirely and look at Zion Canyon as a whole, because the canyon itself, independent of any trail, presents a hazard that is both well documented and consistently underestimated. The Virgin River carved Zion Canyon over millions of years. It is still carving it. The river that runs through the canyon floor is the same agent that created the walls above it, and it is capable of the same violence today that it exercised over geological time, compressed now into hours instead of millennia. Zion's flash flood history begins long before the modern park existed. In 1961, 4 Boy Scouts died in a flash flood in the park's canyon system. In 1993, 2 scout leaders died in a flash flood in Kolob Canyon. In 1998, 2 hikers drowned in the Narrows. In 2001, a 10-year-old boy was washed away on the Canyon Overlook Trail. In 2014, a hiker drowned in the Narrows. In 2015, 7 people died in Keyhole Canyon. The mechanism of Zion's flash floods is specific and worth understanding completely. The Colorado Plateau, the geological province that contains Zion, Bryce Canyon, and the Grand Canyon, is characterized by hardpan soil that does not absorb water readily. When rain falls on the plateau above the canyon, it runs off the surface immediately, channeling into drainages that feed the Virgin River and its tributaries. The canyons below receive water that was not generated there and arrives without warning. The North Fork of the Virgin River rose from 55 cubic feet per second to 2,630 cubic feet per second in 15 minutes on September 14th, 2015. That is a multiplication of roughly 48 times normal flow in 15 minutes, in a canyon where the walls rise straight and there is nowhere to go but with the water. The park monitors upstream weather and issues closure orders when flash flood risk is elevated. As Keyhole Canyon demonstrated, the window between a warning and an event can be shorter than the time it takes to reach everyone who needs to hear it. The Narrows, the section of Zion Canyon where the walls close to within 20 feet of each other and visitors walk directly in the river, is the park's second most iconic experience after Angel's Landing. Hundreds of thousands of people wade the Virgin River through the Narrows every year. It is extraordinary. It is also a slot canyon with no high ground, fed by the same drainage system that filled Keyhole Canyon in 15 minutes. The park issues daily Narrows reports classifying water conditions: not recommended, caution advised, fast and cold, swift and dangerous. These classifications are based on gauge readings and weather forecasts. They are useful. They are not guarantees. A storm generating upstream of the canyon, upstream in the watershed, not upstream in the canyon itself, can produce a flood wave that arrives in the Narrows with limited warning regardless of the classification at the time a visitor enters. In the September 2015 event that killed 7 in Keyhole Canyon, the same storm system produced flooding in multiple drainages simultaneously. The Narrows was among the canyons that closed, but the closure came after flooding had already begun. The river is the park is the river, and the river operates on its own schedule. There is a statistic about Angel's Landing that is worth presenting carefully because it can be read 2 different ways. More than 300,000 people hiked Angel's Landing in 2019, according to park data. In that same year, 2 people died on the trail, Pradeep Beryl Solomon in April and Savannah McTague in November. That produces a fatality rate of approximately 1 in 150,000 hikers. By that calculation, Angel's Landing is far less dangerous than driving to the park. The odds of dying on any given trip up the chain section are statistically very small, but statistics describe populations. They do not describe individuals. They do not describe the specific afternoon when the weather turns, the specific moment when a foot slips, the specific narrow section where 2 hikers are passing each other, and one of them must release the chain. The odds of dying on Angel's Landing per visit are low. The consequences of the event when it does occur are absolute. There is no partial fall from Angel's Landing. There is no moderate injury from a 500-foot drop onto Navajo sandstone. The terrain is not forgiving in the way that statistical averages are forgiving. In the moment the margin disappears, statistics are irrelevant. This is the specific character of Angel's Landing's danger. Not that it is constantly lethal, it is not, but that when it becomes lethal, it does so with a finality that no amount of subsequent medical intervention can address. By the time help is needed on the chain section of Angel's Landing, it is almost always too late for help to matter. The winter version of Angel's Landing presents hazards that are entirely distinct from its summer profile, and that have received almost no attention in the trail's extensive media coverage. Ice forms on the sandstone surface in sections that do not receive direct sunlight during the short winter days, particularly on the north-facing aspects of the chain route. Ice on Navajo sandstone is not always visible. It forms as a thin, transparent layer that is indistinguishable from wet rock until weight is applied. In January 2015, a hiker fell from Angel's Landing and died. January, a month when most people do not think of Zion as a high-visitation destination, when the permit system was not yet in place, when the trail was quieter, and the crowds of summer were months away. Winter visitation to Zion has increased significantly over the past decade as the park's profile has grown, and as visitors have sought to avoid the summer crowds. The canyon in winter, when the walls are lit by low-angle light and snow dusts the red rock, is one of the most beautiful places in the American Southwest. It draws people who are not equipped for winter hiking, who have not thought about ice on sandstone, who have arrived wearing trail runners instead of microspikes. The National Park Service closes the Angels Landing chain section when ice is present. The closure is based on ranger assessment. Rangers cannot be on the trail continuously, and ice conditions can change faster than assessment schedules can capture, forming in the shade while sun-exposed sections remain clear, creating a trail that is safe in some sections and lethal in others within the space of a few yards. At what point does a natural feature become too dangerous to remain open to general public access? It is a question that has no clean answer, and that the National Park Service has been wrestling with for decades. The Grand Canyon's south rim has guardrails at some viewpoints and open edges at others. Half Dome has cables and a permit system. Angels Landing now has a permit system. Each of these represents a judgment about the acceptable level of risk in a public wilderness made by a federal agency that is simultaneously responsible for visitor safety and for preserving the wild character of places that derive their meaning from being genuinely wild. A guardrailed, fully protected Angels Landing would not be Angels Landing. It would be a viewing platform. The experience of moving over that narrow sandstone ridge, with the canyon dropping away on both sides, with your hands on a chain bolted into 190-million-year-old rock, is an experience that cannot be made safe without being unmade entirely. But the 13-year-old boy who fell in October 2021 was 13 years old, and the 14-year-old who died on a $5 dare in 2004 was 14. And the question of what age is appropriate for a trail with this incident record is a question that no permit lottery, no warning sign, and no chain bolt system has yet answered. The NPS mortality data for Zion between 2007 and 2025 recorded 57 deaths across all causes. 49% of those deaths, 29 of the 57, were caused by falls. Not flash floods, not heat, not car accidents on the park road, falls. Falling is the dominant cause of death in Zion National Park, and Angels Landing accounts for nearly 40% of all falling deaths in the park since 2007. That is the demographic reality of this trail within this park, and it exists alongside a statistic that the same data reveals. Men are 1.5 times more likely than women to die from falls in Zion. The highest risk age group is 45 to 64. Not teenagers, not the elderly, middle-aged men. The research published in Health Promotion and Physical Activity in 2025, conducted by Travis Heggie, Amanda Hawks, and Thomas Cooper, and based on a formal review of Angels Landing's incident record, found consistent contributing factors across the deaths: wet conditions, wind, terrain beyond the designated trail, and the chain sections themselves. The study was the first peer-reviewed academic analysis of fatalities on a specific trail in the national park system. It confirmed what the incident record had been suggesting for decades, that the risk factors are identifiable, consistent, and not distributed randomly. They concentrate in wet weather, on the descent, and in terrain that lies beyond where the chains end. Let's talk about the people who survive Angels Landing. More than 300,000 people completed the hike in 2019. Millions have done it across the trail's history. The vast majority of people who attempt the chain section complete it without incident, take their photographs, and descend safely. They come home and tell their friends it was the best hike they have ever done. They post the photographs, they recommend it, and their experience is real and genuine. Angels Landing is, by every measure, one of the most extraordinary hiking experiences available in the United States. The danger of Angels Landing is not that it consistently kills people. It does not. The danger is that the conditions for a fatal fall exist on every single traverse of the chain section, and that the experience of completing the hike safely does not reduce those conditions for the next person. Every hiker who finishes Angels Landing without incident has not been in a place that was safe. They have been in a place that was dangerous, and in which nothing went wrong on that particular traverse. The distinction matters, because the millions of people who have done it safely become the social proof that makes the next person feel it is something they can do. That social proof is not wrong. Most people can complete it, but it encodes the wrong lesson. The lesson is not that the trail is safe. The lesson is that the trail is dangerous, and that most dangerous things, most of the time, do not kill the person doing them. Most of the time is not the same as safe. The chains on Angel's Landing were first installed in 1926, the same year Walter Roosh, the first superintendent of Zion National Park, had Walter's Wiggles constructed, the 21 steep switchbacks that are the final obstacle before Scout Lookout. The trail to Angel's Landing was cut into the rock that same year. The chain section has been part of Zion's experience for an entire century. In that century, the trail has not changed in any fundamental way. The sandstone is the same sandstone, 190 million years older than it was in 1926 by exactly 99 years. The drop-offs are the same drop-offs. The chains have been replaced and maintained. The bolts have been assessed. The footboards have been updated. The warning signs have multiplied. The permit system has been added. And the deaths have continued. Not every year, not evenly distributed, but continuously, across a century, as each generation of visitors encounters the same ridge, the same narrow sections, the same moment of releasing the chain to let someone pass, the same slick sandstone on a wet afternoon. The trail has outlasted every intervention designed to make it safer. It has outlasted every discussion about whether it should be restricted. It has outlasted its own designation to the National Register of Historic Places in 1987. And it will outlast the visitors who come to it next year, and the year after, and the year after that, most of whom will descend safely, and some of whom will not. Zion National Park is worth every visit. The canyon at dawn, when the light moves from the rim down the walls in a slow progression of color, is one of the most extraordinary natural experiences in the American Southwest. The Narrows on a clear day, wading through water that carved these walls over millions of years, is a hike through geology with no equivalent. And the view from Angel's Landing's summit, the canyon spreading in every direction, the Virgin River a silver thread 1,488 feet below, is the kind of view that justifies every difficult step of the climb. But Angel's Landing asks something specific and non-negotiable in return. It asks that you honestly assess your own balance, your own fear response, your own physical condition, not optimistically, not based on what you want to be true, but based on what is actually true at the moment you are on the chain. It asks that you check the weather before you start and turn around if it changes while you are on the chain section. It asks that you treat Scout Lookout as a genuine decision point, not a rest stop. It asks that you understand that the chains are an aid, not a guarantee, and that the rock beneath your feet is 190 million years old and indifferent to your plans. It asks that you understand the difference between a trail that is challenging and a trail that is unforgiving. Most challenging trails will let you make a mistake and recover. Angel's Landing will not. On the chain section, the margin between a normal step and a fatal one is sometimes measured in inches, and the rock does not offer second chances. The 13-year-old boy who fell in October 2021 had done everything right up to the moment he didn't. He was with his family. He was on the trail. He was in the place that hundreds of thousands of people go every year and leave safely. He was 13 years old, and the canyon was 1,488 feet deep, and the sandstone was 190 million years old, and none of those things adjusted themselves for him. The trail is still there. The chains are still there. The permits are still being issued. Every day the park is open, hundreds of people clip their permits to their packs, walk past the warning signs at Scout Lookout, and reach for the first chain. Most of them will reach the summit. Most of them will take the photograph. Most of them will descend safely and drive back to their hotels and post the image online and tell their friends it was the best hike of their lives. And the canyon will receive all of it the way it has received everything for millions of years, without adjustment, without preference, and without memory of who reached the top and who did not come down. Angel's Landing is not the last place in the American National Park system where the gap between a trail's reputation and its reality has written itself into a record of loss. But the next park on this list presents a different kind of danger entirely, one that is not vertical, not sudden, and not the result of a single misstep. It is a park so geologically violent, so thermally active, so systematically misunderstood by the millions of people who arrive with a camera and a car that its danger is everywhere at all times, in ways that are invisible until they are not. The ground temperature in parts of this park can reach nearly 200 degrees Fahrenheit. The most popular boardwalk in the park crosses directly over terrain that has exploded, without warning, multiple times in recorded history. And the single most dangerous decision a visitor can make is one that millions of them make every single year, stepping off the path to get closer to something beautiful.